Good afternoon, and a very warm welcome to this, the 77th Annual General Meeting of Scvo. My name is Maureen McGinn, and I'm delighted to be chairing this event as my first duty in the role of Scvo's Honorary President. Now, whenever we gather together, whether in a room or virtually, there's always a need to begin with some housekeeping information, and here's ours. This AGM is being recorded, which captures chat as well as the speaker's contributions. It'll be shared on the Scvo website and the YouTube channel after the event. Feel free to use the chat function, but if you would like to ask a question, can we ask you to use the Q&A? You can upvote questions by liking them in the Q&A function. I will open the floor for questions at the end of the formal business, but you can add questions at any time. Thank you too for all of you who sent in kind and supportive messages when registering to attend. They were really lovely to read. The quorum for decisions is 20, and we already have more votes than that online, so we are quorate. Scvo's annual review for 2019-2020 was published on the website yesterday, if you'd like to take a look at that anytime. Now, one advantage of holding the meeting online is that it certainly does allow more people to attend and participate, even at a busy time of year. I'm told that we've got people here from the Borders to Sutherland and Argyll and Bute to East Lothian. Although I miss the opportunities that we gain from gathering together, such as the opportunity to have a chance encounter with new people, as well as the chance to renew old connections. There's no doubt that 2020 has been a year like no other, and shortly we'll hear about the year that's passed since the last AGM and a little of what is planned for the coming year. For me personally, this year brought the invitation to become Scvo's Honorary President, and it is true to say I could not have been more pleased or moved to have had the chance to support the work and actually be part of this great organisation at this time. And I feel it's truly an honour for me to do it. And the annual review that I just mentioned is evidence of, I think, the rich diversity of relevant work, activity and services from this organisation in recent times. Before we move to the body of the meeting, I'd like to say thank you on behalf of Scvo. And that's a thank you to all of the people and organisations who've helped us do so much good work by funding core activity and specific projects. This slide shows everyone who has funded Scvo over the last year, and their support has been essential, enabling us to succeed and do so much to make a difference. And now, to give you a flavour of that difference, we have a short film including some of the great people with whom we work and which also captures some of the feedback that we've had.
(2019-20) has been a year of change for Scvo, and that's before taking a worldwide pandemic into consideration. All our activity, from the gathering to providing vital IT support and boosting opportunities for Community Jobs Scotland, has been delivered against the backdrop of significant change at Scvo. This has included implementing a new organisational structure, rolling out a culture change programme with a focus on coaching, and reviewing our membership offer. You may have noticed we have a new look too. This leaves us in the best possible position to champion the sector, provide services and debate big issues. We are committed to supporting Scotland's voluntary sector to achieve its ambitions throughout the challenges it faces in 2021 and beyond.
So, and now to the formal business. And we start with the minutes of last year's AGM. The meeting was held on the 4th of December 2019. I need to tell you that there's an error in the minute because it refers to the Treasurer as Paul Bannon and the year is 2015, when in fact it was Fiona Gillespie and the year was, of course, 2019. The minutes have now been amended, and so it's on that basis that we'll be seeking your approval. We're using the polling function to approve the minute as a correct record, but if you've already voted electronically, please don't vote again. And it's one vote per member organisation, so please only vote if you're the duly authorised person. So if you can please vote now. So that the minutes are approved as a correct record, subject to that one amendment. Thank you very much. Now it's now my pleasure to invite Andrew Burns, SCVO convener, to present his report. Over to you, Andrew.
Many thanks, Maureen. Hope everybody can hear and see me okay. And thanks again, Maureen, for both not just chairing today's AGM, but also for taking on the role of Honorary President. It's very much appreciated. Many of you will know that Maureen's taken over from Brendan Dick, who was SCVO's Honorary President, I think, for over 10 years. And I would just like to start by saying a big thank you to Brendan, who stuck with us for so long and who supported SCVO in many different ways across the years. And I think it is fair to say that it's been quite a year, colleagues. At our last AGM, as Maureen mentioned, in December 2019, we just couldn't possibly have known just how challenging the subsequent 12 months was going to be. And SCVO, like all other voluntary organisations, has had to rapidly change what we do, how we do it, and our overall aims, ambitions and activities do still stand strong, but how we achieve them has changed quite dramatically. And I and my fellow trustees have been hugely impressed, really hugely impressed by the way the SCVO team has adapted, how the organisation has pulled together, and how everyone has stepped up to the challenges that 2020 has thrown at them throughout this extraordinary year. And I want to tell you a bit about that year just now, but of course it is important to remember that the formal year covered by our annual report and accounts ended on the 31st of March 2020, which was just 1 week after the start of the first lockdown. So much of what I'm about to talk about it relates to that time period, 2019-2020, up to the end of March 2020. And it really won't be until we do this again next year that we'll see the full impact of the pandemic on SCVO and on the broader sector as a whole. All that said, so firstly, as you all know, we are a membership organisation, and I'm really pleased to report that our membership has grown throughout the year. And in the course of 2019-2020, we welcomed 176 new members and 16 new supporters. And that trend, I'm again pleased to say, is continuing. Of course, we know that sadly, the financial impact of coronavirus will likely see that change as we see organisations, both big and small, as I've already indicated, find that they can no longer function throughout the course of the next year. We are reviewing our membership offer, and Anna may well mention more about that in a minute. And in 2019, many of you will remember that we launched what was then a new 3-year strategic plan, which was to cover the years 2019 to 2022. And alongside that, as Gareth said in the video, we restructured the organisation to focus our efforts on delivering against that plan. And we've been rolling out a culture change programme to help our staff feel valued, empowered, and able to fulfil their potential. It's really important to me personally that SCVO is seen as a good employer. And even before remote working kicked in back in March, we were very flexible in how and where people worked, and that has undoubtedly paid dividends over the subsequent 10 to 12 months. In 2019, that was actually recognised for us as an organisation when we were awarded Carer Positive status. And we continue to have generally positive staff survey results that we are learning from and continue to build upon. Earlier in the year, if you were at the gathering in February, you'll have seen the launch of our refreshed branding. We hope this feels more modern, engaging, and less disparate than before. We found that in the past that it wasn't always clear to people that some of our services or products were all part of the same SCVO family. And it's important that what we do and what we offer is clear and has a common, clear branding, and I hope that is now the case for all of you. And you can see one example of the rebrand, obviously, in Third Force News, our news website and monthly magazine for and about the voluntary sector. TFN, as it's known, is reaching more people than ever with a hugely increased volume of web views throughout the 2019-2020 year and more e-bulletin subscribers than ever before. The magazine has quickly shifted during the pandemic to an e-reader format, and feedback tells us that many readers are enjoying this new format. So I think even when we do return to hard copy, we're going to likely keep the e-reader version going forward. And of course, even before COVID struck for the UK in March 2020, not everything went well. Like many organisations, we continue to be challenged by Scotland's approach to managing European structural funds, which do still exist for the moment. Our Community Jobs Scotland programme was quite significantly impacted by a much reduced budget as the Scottish Government and local government changed their approach to employability support. And we've had to deliver far fewer jobs for the sector and reduce their length. Anna, again, might touch on what might happen in the future on this issue in a moment. But despite these challenges, we created and filled 548 jobs to help disadvantaged young people into work. The Community Jobs Scotland team also held recruitment events in Fife and Motherwell. And we have had some great films on our website, which you can see, where young people and their employers describe the difference that CGS has made to them. And we also support voluntary sector employers through our Good News job website, obviously. And throughout 2019-2020, we advertised 3,679 jobs for some 1,086 organisations. And we connected a remarkable 75,000 people with job opportunities every single month. And that's a really remarkable set of statistics. And I've mentioned already earlier in the year, our flagship gathering event in February 2020, it welcomed over 3,000 people and 139 exhibitors to the SECC in Glasgow, which is obviously now being utilised for other purposes. But as well as an amazing range of events and conversations back then, speakers and activities, we did also support the Simon Community Scotland's initiative to address period poverty, which many of you will have seen was debated in the Scottish Parliament just in the last few weeks. And believe it or not, over the 2 days of the gathering, we collected 50 bags of underwear, toiletries and sanitary products for Simon Community Scotland's initiative. Later in the year, the Scottish Charity Awards 2019 attracted 185 entries and had a record-breaking 34,000 votes in the People's Choice Award. As well as the glitter and awards ceremony at the EICC, the finalists for the first time were also recognised in January at a reception hosted by the First Minister at Edinburgh Castle, an event which I know they all thoroughly enjoyed as I did myself. Our training service has offered over 60 courses throughout the year to more than 700 learners, so colleagues in the voluntary sector were able to gain new skills or refresh existing skills. And training and learning is also a big part of our work to build digital capacity and confidence in the sector. One example is our work with housing associations, because we do know that people living in social housing are 20% less likely to have essential digital skills. And throughout 2019-2020, we coordinated a new Scotland-wide network of digital champions in social housing, training 31 digital motivators across 29 housing associations and affecting some 264 frontline staff, enabling them to support people living in social housing. And we also created an online digital checkup tool that many of you will have used for organisations to assess their own digital maturity and plan what they do next. And we worked with the Scottish Government and the third sector interfaces, the TSIs, to deliver an improved digital solution for the Saltire Awards that recognise people's volunteering efforts. And throughout 2019-2020, we managed the Community Capacity and Resilience Fund, which supported 72 organisations to deliver frontline services, helping people deal with the impact of welfare reform, poverty and inequality. And also through the Carers Act Transformation Support Fund, we delivered grants to 24 organisations supporting unpaid carers, particularly focused on technology support. And the Digital Participation Charter Fund supported some 19 organisations to run projects to build their digital skills and confidence. And that relationship between the funder and the funded, as we all know, can be a difficult one sometimes. And last year we launched the Principles for Positive Partnership, the guidance that we jointly developed with the Scottish Government and Evaluation Support Scotland. And that should help government policy teams in particular to take a more relationship-based approach to funding over the coming months. And our information service generally, obviously, has had to refocus very quickly since March. But before that, we had provided tailored responses to around 2,000 complex inquiries across the year. And lots of our inquiries, as you won't be surprised to hear, are about governance. And we did develop practical resources like the Good Governance Checkup throughout the year and the Good Governance and Safeguarding Guide to help members review and improve their own governance. Our internal and external payroll service celebrated its 25th birthday this year. And from April 2019 through to March 2020, the team processed payroll for 437 organisations, affecting some 6,600 employees, which equates to an almost unbelievable 80,000 pay slips across the year. And we also expanded our managed IT portfolio to 49 clients. And of course, SCVO also has a very, very crucial role, an important role in lobbying and influencing national policy on behalf of the wider voluntary sector. And in 2019, we did ask our members and others working in charities, voluntary groups and social enterprises across Scotland to tell us about successful partnership work with the public sector. And we collected all of that to create an online resource on successful collaboration, how it works in practice, what the benefits are for both organisations and communities, with some top tips from the people working in positive partnerships right now. And that's all available via the website. And I'm sure we'll have lots more examples of a result of what's happened and a result of collaboration across the last 10 to 12 months. And SCVO's policy forum throughout the year was chaired by David McColgan from the British Heart Foundation. Thanks to David for all his work on that. It developed a manifesto for the future, which hopefully many of you will read, still available on our website, with recommendations to address some of the most profound social, economic, political, environmental challenges in memory. And it identified planet, humanity, and citizenship as the three pillars, or three of the pillars of significant importance. And we launched the manifesto at the gathering last February, and it continues to inform all of our policy work going forward. And that focus on the big challenges was evident in the conference we co-hosted with Scottish Power, Keep Scotland Beautiful and the University of Strathclyde to build new partnerships and relationships between business, voluntary organisations and public bodies around the UN Sustainable Development Goals, another very successful event. And in our work on the development of the Scottish National Investment Bank, we did secure an amendment to the legislation that means voluntary organisations are now eligible to apply to the Scottish National Investment Bank. And we publish throughout the year research reports identifying trends across the voluntary sector on issues including funding, finance, salaries and the gender pay gap. And as you would expect, colleagues, we've also undertaken some very specific projects, very focused projects over the course of the year. And one highlight for me was publishing our book, Charities Scotland and Holyrood, 20 Years Delivering Change, which was briefly seen in the slides and the video a few moments ago. And that book celebrates 20 years of the voluntary sector, working with, challenging and influencing the Scottish Parliament. And we also created a podcast of interviews with the people who had led the successful campaigns, which were highlighted in the book, to find out how their campaigns started and how they reached their successful goals. And finally, colleagues, obviously can't ignore the impact of coronavirus, which, as I've said, will primarily impact on the 2020-21 formal year, which we'll report on at next year's AGM. But since March 2020, SCVO, like many of you I know, if not all of you who are watching, has provided, has had to adapt and has provided information, updates and resources for voluntary sector organisations in Scotland through our very, very popular coronavirus third sector information hub. and we have built on years of digital capacity expansion to support the sector to pivot to online working, offering a range of digital and IT support. And we are determined as an organisation to maximise all of this year's learning to make sure our offer to members in the wider sector is even better going forward than it has been before. So a very, very busy year for SCVO. I know it has been for everybody. And before I hand over to Anna as Chief Executive, I myself as convener just want to conclude by thanking all of you, our members, old and new, for the invaluable work you've undertaken throughout this year, absolutely invaluable work, and say a huge thank you to all of you and also to all the staff at SCVO for their flexibility, sheer hard work, and their never-ending good humour throughout an extremely challenging set of circumstances across the last 10 to 12 months. Thanks very much for listening, and I'll hand over to Anna now. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks very much for joining us. I think Andrew's given us a pretty comprehensive summary of what we had been doing as we came up to this strange episode in our lives. And because of that, I had a wee look back at what I said in this slot last year to see if how much of what I thought would come to pass actually had come to pass. And actually, apart from the fact we'd never thought of mentioning a pandemic, pretty much everything is still, nothing stopped, everything continued, just looking at it through a different lens. And some of the things we were doing were already, were actually more important in the context of the pandemic. So when our trustees reviewed the strategic plan in June to see if it needed to change in the light of that coronavirus curveball, they agreed that it was still relevant, and our 3 strategic aims are still to support, promote and develop a confident, sustainable voluntary sector. It's probably more relevant even than it was when we launched it. And Andrew has told you quite a lot about what we've done over the 2019-20 year. I'm going to talk a wee bit about what's happened since then and where we think that's going. Andrew's touched on a lot of our services. One thing to highlight is we've just launched this last month, a new HR service funded through the National Lottery Community Fund, for which we're extremely grateful. It's very exciting, and I'm really keen to see that develop into a sustainable part of our core offer as we progress it. Other services do continue to grow. I think Andrew mentioned the payroll team, and I have to give them a special mention because they were probably the most office-based team that we have in the organisation, and I know that they really miss the banter of all working together, but actually they've done amazingly well in shifting everything online, and over the coming year we're going to be building on the learning from that and modernising what we do. And again, Good Moves, the jobs portal is picking back up again, having seen obviously a massive drop in recruitment at the start of the pandemic. But we're looking at how we can improve the customer experience of using Good Moves. Andrew mentioned Third Force News. Really proud of how that's developing, and particularly it's been a really good channel for our Never More Needed campaign that we've been doing throughout the last few months. And we'll hear a bit more about Never More Needed shortly. Andrew's mentioned the gathering, and the gathering, who could have predicted that only a month after we had those over 3,000 people in the SECC, the SECC would be a hospital and we would have no face-to-face contact for months to come. So vaccine or no vaccine, the gathering 2021 is going to be quite different, and that's a bit sad. It's a bit scary, but it's also really exciting because we hopefully can do some new and different things. And the charity awards this year were also completely online. Only Sally Magnuson was allowed to be in the EICC with their amazing tech team who made it all just work so well. And it was really disappointing not to be in that buzz and get all the hugs and the food and drink, of course, that you get at the charity awards. But we did reach over 5,000 viewers across Zoom and YouTube. And we got nearly 28,000 votes for the People's Choice Award from 91 different countries. And it was still an emotional night, even though we were in our kitchens or living rooms or wherever we were. So that's really making us think about how we might do that differently and take a more blended approach in the future. So before lockdown hit, but when pandemic was obviously going to be a massive deal, the Scottish Government asked us to become a resilience hub for the sector, and we just said yes. We didn't know what that meant. They didn't know what they were asking us. We all thought it sounded like a good idea. So the first thing we did obviously was develop the coronavirus information hub that Andrew's mentioned, which our information service has been around for a very long time, but at that point there was only one show in town really, so it became all about coronavirus. And it's become a really valued and comprehensive resource, and it continues to be that go-to source of advice, information and resources. And we've also branched out into webinars, which has been really exciting. Lots of people came to us asking about funding. So when the Scottish Government announced their crisis funding for the sector, it was the obvious next step to work together with a group of experienced grant makers to create a platform to make that as simple as possible for the organisations who were needing support. So as well as getting millions of pounds out the door, that's going into a long-term partnership with independent funders that could develop into something quite groundbreaking. And I think really that partnership word has been the key to the whole of what's been going on across Scotland in terms of the pandemic, at a local level, at a national level and a regional level. And we've seen that where relationships were already established, things have worked really well. Where they've had to be built from scratch, that's been more challenging. But we've also seen some new collaborations and collective action kicking in communities and nationally. I think a great example of that is the work that we're leading on Connecting Scotland, so tackling digital inclusion on a massive scale, and a true partnership of Scottish Government, local government and the voluntary sector and the private sector. It's a really complex bit of work and it keeps growing arms and legs, but we know it's making a real difference to people's lives, and it draws on the strengths of all the players involved in the partnership to meet the needs of families in Scotland. That shift in remote working has also had quite a big impact on our approach to how we use our buildings. So we have 2 offices in Glasgow, one in Inverness and one in Edinburgh, and we share all of them with other organisations from across the sector. And everyone in those offices has had to shift to working from home. So I don't think we'll ever go back to 100% office-based working. So we're really having a long, hard look at our property strategy to take account of our own needs, but also the emerging needs of other voluntary organisations. And our policy and influencing work, which as Andrew has mentioned, has been really important for us, got kind of blown off course a wee bit at the start of the pandemic. Suddenly Brexit wasn't dominating our thoughts. It's back now though, unfortunately. But and some of the longer term issues had to take a bit of a back seat. But very quickly it became clear that that manifesto that Andrew talked about was still really important in terms of the context, and particularly moving forward to recovery and renewal. So we're still involved in lots of conversations, evidence sessions, consultation events. That will not change, that will only develop. And I was thinking that we've all had really surreal moments during this, the last few months. And I think probably one of my most surreal moments was Zooming with the Lords. So I had to give evidence to the House of Lords via Zoom, which was quite an odd thing, but it was also really interesting. They were lovely. So I think an aspect of our work that Andrew touched on that does continue to be challenging is the employability work. So you'll be aware of the No One Left Behind policy that Scottish Government and COSLA are implementing, which is a really flagship kind of policy direction, and it does involve shifting employability support to as local a level as possible. That's obviously been impacted by the change in the labour market, and we are working really closely in a policy context with Scottish Government on how we achieve that. But it also impacts on us specifically in relation to Community Jobs Scotland. We'd actually expected that to be coming to an end in its current form at the end of March 2021. But we've had a year's grace and it's been extended for another year. But as Andrew said, the allocation of jobs was severely reduced because of the government cutting the budget. And it has been extended, but we've no idea what they're going to resource for that coming year. So we're just kind of watching and waiting on that one. And our membership review, I'm really pleased to say that we're getting to the conclusion of that, and we're expecting to be launching our new offer early in the new year. And if any aspect of that needs members agreement, then of course we'll be back in touch about how to do that. So now I'm just going to finish with a very short film about some of the feedback that we've had over the year. So Gareth, if you could put that in action, that would be great.
Having SCVO throughout this time period has just been like a lifeline, to be honest. The fact that you're able to, I mean, I don't know how you did this overnight, pull together the coronavirus information hub for the third sector. That is such a brilliant one-stop shop for information and, you know, what grants are opening, what criteria, how to apply. It was so easy, and it was available so quickly. My team are on that every day.
SCVO's new HR service was set up as a result of feedback from our members telling us that there was a need for the service. So we applied for some funding, and we were successful in obtaining that funding, and that enabled us to employ 2 new members of staff. Employers need support to support their staff to navigate all the new things that coronavirus has, all the new issues that coronavirus has created. And that's something that our service will provide one-to-one support to employers from across the sector.
I would say in terms of our tenancy, we are tenants at Edward House in Glasgow, and we're very sad to not be there just now. But I would say there's been really good leadership from the SCVO facilities team. We've always known what's happening. It was very clear about what was happening in March and what's been happening throughout, as we hoped we would get back, and then we've not managed to get back to the office. But we know it's all really been well set up for a safe return in the future, which is great. And also we have benefited from a rent reduction, which I'm 100% sure our previous private landlord would not have granted us. So I think that is very welcome, because we've obviously incurred a lot of additional costs moving to home working and so on as well.
Connecting Scotland is essentially a digital inclusion initiative which led by Scottish Government, and the premise of Connecting Scotland is getting devices, connectivity and skills and support out to people who are digitally excluded. SCVO's role in that is primarily delivery, so we're kind of the main delivery partner for Connecting Scotland. So that entails a lot of assessing applications coming through, checking organisations' ability to be able to deliver support to people getting devices, and collaborating with the 32 local authorities on assessment panels to decide where devices go for each local authority.
The brilliant thing about having done some work for SCVO for a long time is that I've been able to build a good relationship with the events team and the training team. And these are people who I know will go the extra mile, not only for SCVO clients, but for those of us who are trainers who help deliver the programme of training. And that's really important, that positive relationship. So what the team have been able to do is to talk to me and work with me to help me adapt some training that I've been offering for a number of years, but also to deliver new sessions which are more appropriate for these non-face-to-face times.
In combination with Scottish Government and Oscar and Scvo and a number of others, SCVO took on the role of providing a single sort of trusted source of information content for the sector, and that's the Coronavirus Information Hub on our website. It was really important we got this up and running as quickly as possible. It was really important that the sector knew that there was one place they could come to find out the absolutely core and crucial information, and be signposted on to really trusted sources for other types of content that were relevant to their particular type of activity or organisation.
So thank you, Anna and Andrew, for your reflections and insights, and I think giving us the opportunity to hear about the successes as well as the future opportunities and some of the challenges as well. And that's the first time I've seen that film, and I think it's a really nice mixture of the internal and the external perspectives on the work of SCVO as well. Now, the next formal item on the agenda is the Treasurer's Report, and that's of the audited financial statements of SCVO for the year to 31st of March 2020. And so I now invite Fiona Gillespie to present the report.
Thank you, Maureen. That's kind of you to hand on to me at this time. So just in terms of, as everyone else has highlighted, we're actually talking about quite a far period behind us rather. So to the end of March 2020, it's sometimes quite difficult to cast our minds and focus on that 12 months. But if you bear with me, that's just what I'm going to highlight for the time being. So as is always the case, you'll find our report and accounts on the website. And you'll see within that a clean audit report from our current auditors. Those of you who are eagle-eyed may also spot that we would often see the name of Scott Moncrief as the auditors, whereas in this case you may see the name, or you will see the name, Azets Audit Services Limited. And that is just a reorganisation of Scott Moncrief. That's not a new appointment in any way, just a reorganisation at that particular organisation. So looking at the financial year, much like many of third sector organisations, we started the year looking to a deficit within our budgets, and the targets really were to find new income or control costs. And that's always a fine balance. I'm sure you all understand from your own organisations, it's often a fine balance to tread. But for 2019-2020, the accounts are a little more complicated than they can first appear, and there's a couple of non-recurring one-off items which I'll highlight just in a moment. But in terms of the underlying operating performance, SCVO made a surplus on the unrestricted operations of just over £240,000, and that was based on £14.5 million of unrestricted turnover. If you turn to the restricted activities, there was a loss there of 259,000. But this is almost all down to how income is recognised, and much of that was in the previous year. There was a bit of pulling forward of income recognition, which has impacted that. And if you look at the accounts, you'll see there's a total surplus, but that includes these two exceptional items, shall we say. So one of them was the sale of Haywaite House in June 2019. And the second was a legacy, which was received in March of this year. Now, in terms of our income, much of the income is in the form of onward grants. And during 2019-2020, SCVO passed on to the sector funding of just over £8 million. The cash inflow from the sale of Haywaite House and the legacy together meant that we finished the year with a healthy balance sheet, showing net assets of just under £3.2 million and free reserves of £2.5 million. Now, that figure for free reserves is just slightly above SCVO's reserve policy of holding 2.3, and that relates to around 4 months of operating expenditure. As the last financial year drew to an end, the pandemic clearly began in earnest and really changed the environment overnight. I knew, listened to one of our members just commenting on the experience that she had, and actually one day they were fine, the next day they were looking for support, almost that quick. And so the year-end reserves really allowed us to step up to the plate, if you like, and provide that support. So allowed SCVO to be resilient and support the sector in what was really challenging, unnerving, difficult times, and people were looking for advice and a bit of guidance on how to deal with certain situations. So the Coronavirus Hub has been a wonderful success, and that's really down to a lot of hard work from our colleagues within the organisation, who adapted exceptionally quickly and exceptionally well. Our organisation as a board, we're very proud of that achievement. And the services which they provided within that hub ranged to all sorts of topics. Direct funding, and as the lady mentioned in the video, knowing how to go about to achieve that funding. Were you eligible for the funding? How did you get your hands on that? to what was a rather complex system of furlough, which is not only getting the furlough, but it's the tax implications, it's the reclaims, etc. So there's lots of underlying operational detail which people really needed to have some guidance, which they had nowhere else really to turn where the guidance was clear enough. So having that information filtered through SCVO, so it was in a usable format, an understandable format, has clearly been a really wonderful achievement for the team. And I say as a board, we would be congratulating them very much on that. So that's a bit of an insight. I'm sure those of you who have the notion to go through report and accounts, if that's what you like to do, all the detail is there on the website. But if anybody has immediate questions, I am ably assisted by Tim Hensher, who is our finance director, and who will assist if there's any questions that we can answer immediately. So I'm just going to try to move some screens around here to see. And one of the questions that we have, apologies if you just bear with me, I can't see all of the question, is to do with the legacy and how did this actually arise? I'm going to ask Tim if he has the insight into the background to that legacy. I know that in terms of how that legacy will be utilised, and the board will take that decision very carefully and make sure that we're putting that to good use for the best of the sector. But perhaps, Tim, would you be able to come in and just talk about the background to that and the source of that legacy, given what we can say, because clearly there's maybe some sensitivities around that.
Hi, it's a bit of a surprise, is the honest answer. It's something we were made aware of at the end of 2018. The legacy comes from a man called William Dunlop, who's a former trustee of SCVO, and he's retained a connection with SCVO by providing a legacy. There was an unrestricted legacy, and as I said, it was somewhat of a surprise to see it come through.
And part of that question was also if we're active in legacy funding. We're not particularly active in sourcing legacies, and it's a very difficult sector, I think, to tread very sensitively in. But as Tim said, this one really much was presented to us rather than sought by us.
So if there are no further questions, then I'm going to say thank you very much, Fiona, and thank you for Tim as well. And we will move to the next item. And Fiona, you mentioned auditors in your report there, and item 5 on your agenda is to ask members to approve the reappointment of Assets Audit Services Limited, formerly Scotland Creef, as auditors, and to authorise the Board of Trustees to determine their remuneration. Now, again, we're using the polling function, so I just remind you not to vote if you've already done so online, and only to vote if you're the duly authorised person for your organisation. So please vote now. And the result is that Asset Audit Services Limited are reappointed as SCVO's auditors, and the board is authorised to determine their remuneration. Thank you for participating in that. Item 6 on the agenda is appointments of trustees. Now, firstly, one trustee, Adam Lang, is coming to the end of his term, so an election has been running over the last few weeks. The nominations are Ibrahim Aleshinoyi, Head of Communication for the Nigerian Community in Scotland, Jordan Allen, Service Quality Director, Thera Scotland, Chris Grant, Community Relationship Manager, AbilityNet, and Adam Lang, Scotland Director of Nesta, standing for a second term. Voting closed at lunchtime today, and I can announce that it was very close and that Adam Lang has been re-elected to the Board of Trustees for a second 3-year term. And I would also like to advise members that the Board of Trustees have agreed to reappoint Andrew Burns as convener for a second 3-year term. Now, this is a bit in the agenda where we say, as anybody else's agenda would probably say any other business, but this is actually points from the floor. And it's an opportunity for members to ask any questions you might have. I've spotted a couple that have been posted in the Q&A, and any others that have come in advance, of course, can be taken. Remember that if you have questions, there's still time. You can put them in the Q&A box, and you can also support and uprate any questions that are already there. And unless there's been any extra, well, it says there are no open questions, so they're actually all being answered. But could I actually say that one of the ones that caught my attention was the question about the status of the gathering 2021. I don't know if anyone wants just to share a bit of information about that.
You froze for me there, Maureen. What was the question?
Sorry, I don't know what happened. Am I moving again? I was going to ask about the question about the status of the gathering 2021, which I spotted.
Yeah. So yeah, I answered that from Rushir, one of our former colleagues, but it would definitely be worth highlighting for everyone else. And probably the other question that was in there as well was that we know that the gathering won't happen physically in February. We're not going to run a substitute gathering in February, even online. We're going to wait and see what happens in terms of face-to-face type activity, and hopefully do something that's more blended slightly later in the year. We just talked about this at the board this earlier today, actually, so we'll have more information coming out about that when we've really thought about it and had a chance to consider all our options. So that'll be early in the new year. We'll be giving out some information about that. The other question was from Debs Clark, who was on the line from Unison, and she was asking about what we're doing in relation to fair work. So we're working quite closely with the Voluntary Sector HR Forum now. We are working more closely with them than we have done in the past. And we also have set up a reference group for our new HR service. So this is very much one of the things that the sector as an employer is one of our key priorities over the coming year. And obviously Fair Work's very much intrinsic to that. And just if people are particularly interested in that, our policy officer, Rachel Lanone, is the key contact for that, or get in touch with me and I'll put you in touch with Rachel. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. And apologies for freezing. I hadn't realised that I had done. And thank you for picking up on both questions, because I was aware that there were two open ones, and by the time I checked again, they were closed. You're very efficient. It's very unsettling. So what I would say though is if a question occurs to anyone, and I see that there's something there at the moment, from Ewan Aitken on, so we'll come back to that one. That's the issue of blended work patterns, which you're grappling with yourselves, is one that we're all having to look at. Can you both share your experiences and see ways in which you can support members in their thinking? Thanks, Ewan.
So yeah, we're looking at that just now, and we're just about to we just have started a bit of research. We're lucky enough to have an internal research officer who's going to be doing this work, and we're looking at doing it possibly in partnership with a couple of other organisations in a similar position. But we're really wanting to find out what everyone's thinking, and that information will all be shared when we've done it, so that everyone can learn from it. There's no point in us just doing it. Again, we talked about this at the board earlier today, and we kind of think that what people tell us now might not be the same as what they would tell us in 6 months' time, because I think at the moment there's quite lots of people are either desperate to get back into a physical working environment, or are quite content working at home and not missing a commute. And I think actually in future there'll be something in the middle, but we really have to look at that and consider what our role is in terms of property and shared space, but also just look at how people want to work. It will be different in the future, we know that, but what that different looks like, we don't know. But we're really happy to be as open and transparent as possible about that work, as I say, because everyone needs to learn from it.
Thank you again, Anna, and thanks to everyone who's posed questions. And just to say that since this event is being recorded, if there's anything that suddenly occurs to you, then all comments and questions can be captured. So please be reassured if there's anything that occurs to you after the event, it can be followed up as appropriate by the great SCVO staff team. Now, earlier this year, in April, SCVO realised how important it would be to capture as much as possible of the truly remarkable work which the voluntary sector were doing across Scotland in response to the pandemic. Charities, community groups, social enterprises across the country were mobilising quickly and swiftly innovating to support communities. Some doing more of what they normally did, but under the most difficult of circumstances. Others doing things in completely new ways. And I think in all of us actually probably doing things in a new way, and sometimes alongside new partners as well. And this short film that you're about to see was made for the Charity Awards. So some of you may already have seen it and know how it offers a really valuable overview of just some of the efforts that you are all making across Scotland.
I think the response from the community and third sector has been nothing short of inspiring. I've seen that here in the town that I stay in, the constituency that I represent, and also across the country as the Cabinet Secretary with responsibility for this across government. The community organisations that have emerged in response to their local need have been phenomenal, and so too has the way the third sector how it's adapted with real agility to respond to the emerging needs that they were faced with and the challenges that they were having to cope with.
Peak is a children's charity. We're based in the East End of Glasgow, but we operate across the city. Prior to COVID, we provided play, creative arts and community development projects for children and young people and families impacted by poverty. Lockdown for us basically meant having to stop all direct delivery services with our families and really look at what we could do in terms of a crisis response. With that, food has always been a part of what Peak does. And luckily for us, we got our mobile food truck Pikachu, the keys of that literally a week before lockdown. So it was a huge bonus for us to get that.
The community had risen to the challenge of supporting people most in need. But really what was essential was that it was coordinated and it was escalated where someone was actually really needing quite intensive support. So, for example, we worked very closely with the Stirlingshire Communities team to staff a central contact number that people could call if they were needing support. So there was one number, they knew who they could contact when they needed help, and they knew that support was coming to them.
There was challenges at either end of the spectrum, whether it was those that suddenly had to ramp up their services because they were needed more than ever, to those that were almost having to wind down because they couldn't deliver because they couldn't have the contact that they needed.
If you think back down to lockdown, you know, lots of places were shutting up shop, people were being furloughed, whereas the third sector were right there on people's doorsteps, right in the front line, on the coal face as we always are, never giving up, always looking to see how we can help people.
It's absolutely critical that we don't just take the third sector and communities for granted. Undoubtedly going forward, it's going to be challenging. We're not going to be able to do everything for everyone. That's the hard side of it. But we should also not take the effort that we've seen and witnessed over the last 5 months for granted. And it's incumbent on us all, whether you're a politician or an individual, to make sure that we say thank you for what has happened. And I think for the awards, it gives us a moment and a real chance to really articulate strongly and powerfully to the sector our gratitude for everything that has gone on over the last 5 months.
So as we approach the end of this event, I'd like to give my sincere thanks to all of you for making time today in busy lives to join us this afternoon. I hope you feel that it's given you a closer look into the scale, the innovation, the range of activity, the energy, and I think the values that is inside the work that SCVO does in these times when the whole of the voluntary and community sector is indeed, just as the film says, never more needed. I'd also like to thank the SCVO team who've made this meeting happen in a new way from all those 76 previous AGMs. Thanks in particular to Gareth Jones for work on the films, Alex Thompson and Joanna Kildee from events, Sarah Kay and Sarah Curry, the membership team, Shan Lower, communications, John Ferguson, graphics, Ali Dutton, all the technology, which helped us today, especially the voting. Also thanks to all of the staff and the board of SCVO for all of the work that they do all year round. And most importantly, thanks to everyone who participated. I wish us the very best for Christmas and an even better 2021. And now I formally close this annual general meeting. Thank you.